and welcome to the Alpha Movement Podcast. My name is Tom Foxley, and on today's show I am joined by someone that you may not have heard of. He is someone out of a completely different field to usual, but he's probably the most well-known guest I've had on the show in terms of his impact on the world. He's also a huge personal influence of mine, and one of the people who wrote a book, or he wrote one of the books that really changed my life, the way I looked at the world. And I know I said this in the interview, but like the man that I'm about to showcase to you is a phenomenal person. A very, without this getting too sycophantic, it's an amazing privilege to interview Seth. So, as I've already alluded to, that man is Seth Godin, marketer, thought changer, like amazing man, philanthropist. Like, there's so many different titles you give this man, but here goes an interview, a very short interview, but a very powerful interview with the one, the only Seth Godin. So, Seth, welcome to the show. As I've already said to you, it's a real privilege to have you on the show. So thank you for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm fabulous, but getting better. How about you?
I'm great, thank you. Where I'd like to start is it's a bit of an out there question, but it's what change are you passionate about making in the world?
Oh, I don't think it's out there at all. I think it's something that I think about almost every hour, that I hope most people think about often, which is I feel like we are flying too low, and that we are living in the most extraordinary time in the history of mankind, with the greatest possibilities and the greatest dangers in front of us. And it makes no sense whatsoever to wake up in the morning and just do what you did yesterday. That's the change I'm trying to make.
How did you go about achieving that yourself?
Well, when you run a marathon, you get tired. And the only difference between people who finish a marathon and people who don't is the people who finish figure out where to put the tired. Nobody runs a marathon saying to themselves, how can I do this without getting tired? So for me, it's how can I seek out the discomfort? How can I find the awkward? Because it's only when we find the awkward that we have a chance at all of doing the kind of work I'm talking about.
Okay. Was there a particular moment where that became your kind of default setting, or the setting that you tried to veer towards?
Well, this is a little bit of a dangerous question, because I think what it does is it allows people to think that that other person had an opportunity you didn't have, or had a moment you could never have, or is somehow different than you. In my experience, everybody who's doing this kind of work got there gradually. It's really rare that a lightning bolt hits you, or that you wake up with a set of genes that are different. It's much more likely that on a very small level, we do something and we find satisfaction in it, so we do it again. So when I think back about the adventures I had in high school, which were fundamentally different than some other people's adventures, these were the adventures of seeking out the awkward. Today, they would be trivial for me, but as a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old, they felt like a big deal. And that cycle started for me then. But I know people who started that cycle when they were 30. I don't think it matters when you start it. You could start it in an hour, and you could do it in a very little bit. But the key is to repeat it.
Of course. Something that I know you have spoken about quite a lot before is education, and it's something I completely agree with you with, and it's something that I think needs a kind of a fundamental change. What would the Seth Godin high school curriculum look like?
Well, I wrote an ebook called Stop Stealing Dreams, and it's free, and about 4 million people have read it. It's on Medium now. And the argument is that what we ought to do in school is only two things. One, teach people to solve interesting problems, and two, teach people how to lead. So what we have to do if we're going to build an institution for that is we must begin with enrollment. How do we get people to want those things to happen? because you can't force anyone to do those two things. Once we get enrollment, then we know how to set people up so they can learn to lead. And we know how to present people with interesting problems that they can go solve. So if you watch a bunch of teenagers at a hackathon, it's fundamentally different than watching a bunch of teenagers at an SAT prep course. Well, I'm more in favor of hackathons and way opposed to SAT courses.
Okay, that makes complete sense. How did you find your art as a young entrepreneur? I think, as you've already alluded to, it was through a lot of trial and error. But what's your kind of answers to that?
Well, I'll start by saying it's not clear to me that the way to be a successful entrepreneur, it's more likely if your goal is to make that you will do it with the most boring business you can possibly find. That art is for people who are looking for something more than a return on an investment. As an entrepreneur, I did too much art and not enough business. And as a result, I was in a lot of pain for a time because I was keeping track of business, not keeping track of art. And there's nothing written down that the way to make money is to make art. In fact, it's often the opposite. That what we do as entrepreneurs is we find a problem and we solve it. We show up with a story that resonates with people who want to hear that story, and we sell them a solution that's worth far more than they pay for it. And then we repeat it and we repeat it and we repeat it. And that sort of nose down, straight up commitment to solving customer problems in a way that's not focused on commodity is the way you make a living as a bootstrapper, as a nascent entrepreneur. Art is what I call it when you're doing something that might not work, when you're going to the edges, when you're doing something that's remarkable. It's art that takes a company from where it was to 10x. It's art that allows us to leave a legacy. None of that is unimportant, but let's not be confused about what the job of the entrepreneur is.
Perfect. A big part of I think what makes art is fear, and the fact that there's going to be fear there. I know it's something you've spoken about at length, but how do you deal with fear when it arises?
You know, the mistake is to try to make the fear go away. The looking for reassurance, figuring out that it's going to be okay. It's probably not going to be okay. It's probably not going to work. You're going to be afraid. Well, that's like getting tired when you run the marathon. Once you know it's going to happen, you can dance with it. That's the secret. Dancing with the fear. Understanding it's coming. Understanding it's part of the deal. Embracing it, using it as a compass, moving forward.
Do you mind if I ask about your meditation practice?
It's not very interesting.
Okay. Has it got any particular roots to it? Or have you kind of picked
My dad started meditating in 1975. He read a book called The Relaxation Response. And it's straight up science. There's no spirituality in the book at all. And I learned from him. And, I'm very sloppy about it. I'm irregular about it. But I find that sitting with mindfulness for 10 or 20 minutes a day is one of the highest leverage things I know how to do.
Okay. When you think of Zig Ziglar, what's the first story that pops into your mind?
Johnny the Showologist in St. Louis, Missouri, and Zig's 15-minute story about getting his shoe shine there. And I once took a connecting flight through St. Louis just so I could get my shoes shined by Johnny. And the punchline of the story is Johnny leans over and says, "Seems a shame." It just seems a shame that a man would have these beautiful Bally shoes and this Hart, Schaffner, and Marx suit, gets himself up and ready to go every day. It just seems a shame that he'd do all that and wouldn't spend an extra $1 to look his best. Gotta love Johnny.
Say there's a guy who's just starting out in the world. What role models would you suggest he follow, or who would you recommend that who would you recommend he follow, and the media that he consumes?
So if you asked me where you should go to get your appendix out, I would strongly suggest you go see somebody who's been to medical school. And in addition to going to medical school, someone who's read the journals and keeps reading the journals. I am stunned when I meet people in the business world who say, oh, I don't read business books. I'm stunned at people who say, I don't know who Kevin Kelly is. They're on the internet, they don't know who Kevin Kelly is. How is that possible? His books are free online. Google them. How could you not know? Or stunned that you don't know what Crossing the Chasm is, or who Jackie Yuba is, or what The Long Tail is. How can you not know? So I don't think the answer is to follow some guy who's going to give you shortcuts and hacks and tell you some quick way to get some famous person to send you an email back or sell you a $99 PDF with guaranteed shortcut SEO strategies. That's nonsense. I'd much rather talk to somebody who spends half their time failing at their art and half their time understanding the state of the art, who has read the real books, done the real work, understands what got us here. That foundation, I'm still stunned at how cheap it is. You know, I have an MBA from Stanford. It cost me and my parents in the old days, I don't know, $80,000. For 1/10 that, you could read every single important work to help you think about how business works. And to not do it is just a crime.
If you could give every human on earth one belief, what would that belief be?
Well, it's a trick question because you want to come up with the perfect sentence that actually has 7 beliefs in it. It's like telling the genie you want to wish for more wishes. It's a mix of belief is overrated with believe in yourself, pick yourself, pay it forward, contribute to the community. It's your turn. So I don't have an eloquent way to say all those things in one, but I think we got to stop waiting for the person down the street or the person on another planet or the person somewhere in between to somehow bless us, pick us, choose us, anoint us, and give us permission, when in fact we could be generous right now.
I think you've said it well enough in that, but you've also said it well enough in all of your books and with the work that you've done. And something that I'd like to, I don't even know whether this, how you respond to this, but what do you believe that most other people would find controversial?
Well, I'm not sure I want to say most,
Okay.
but I believe in science.
In what way?
It's astonishing to me that that's controversial. The scientific method, test and measure. The earth is millions of years old. Vaccines actually prevent people from dying. The world is getting warmer. There are things we know. Gravity, it's not just a good idea, it's the law. Once you accept that the scientific method is always interesting and never perfect, but interesting in the sense that we keep getting more and more accurate in what we understand about how things work, it opens the door for you to make your own choices about how we got here and the data and what's next. That, if you believe in Milton Friedman's explanation of economics, you have a problem, because the scientific method has demonstrated in the last 40 years that behavioral economics is actually more accurate than Friedman's nonsense. And then the door is open for you to start making change happen in the world. So the things we ought to believe are things that science doesn't cover. We ought to believe in possibility. We ought to believe in hope. We ought to believe in goodwill. Those things are essential. We got to believe in those things. But when it comes to stuff where I have the scientific method at my disposal, I think that scientific method does an awfully good job of helping us do better work.
That's a fantastic place to end. So thank you. But where can people find a bit more about you, Seth?
You type Seth into your favorite search engine. I have a book that came out last year called What to Do When It's Your Turn at yourturn.link. But there's 6,500 blog posts to read for free, so why don't you start with those?
That's a perfect place to finish. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the work you do, Tom. It was good to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Alpha Movement Podcast. To find show notes, unique downloads, and more information on the Academy, head to alphamovement.co/blog. And if you enjoyed this episode, head over to iTunes and subscribe. And whilst you're there, please leave me a 5-star review. And don't forget, you can follow me, Tom Foxley, on social media all over the place, or you can find more about the Alpha Movement at facebook.com/alphamovementofficial.